Notes.
So yes, how many of you have been to Keystone?
Oh, wow,
All right. So you guys can give it the talk now. So this is the beautiful Keystone Park. It is over 58 acres. That's what you'll see when you're driving by Donovan. It is 58 acres completely now, recently acquired new land. 17 are wetlands, 17 are desert landscape, as you see, and 2 acres is botanical park that is maintained by this genius. And there's also an archaeological site that is 4,500 years old, about as old as the pyramids in Egypt. There's over 2,000 species of birds been seen, and over 2,000 species of pollinators. Yeah. Yeah. So, Mike, do you want to read your own bio, or should I read it for you? This is Mike Gaiweo, founder of the High Desert Native Plants. He's very genuine and passionate advocate for living in truth and environmental stewardship. 4th generation El Pasoan, Mike founded High Desert in 2007. Since then, he has built wetlands along the Rio Grande, talked in El Paso's Cultivate forums, installed numerous rainwater harvesting systems in homes, churches, and parks, and filled the El Paso area with native trees and plants, and designed and built green infrastructure across the Sun City. A UTEP-trained biologist and watershed management group certified rainwater harvester, Mike brings his knowledge of the Chihuahuan Desert, its flora and fauna, to bear on all high desert projects. Bear. And that's me. I'm Fernanda. I'm a UTEP graduate in biology as well. And I work with Eco El Paso. I've been teaching about climate with Citizens Climate Lobby and Worldwide Teach-In Climate Justice for a while. I'm also a yoga teacher. And over the holidays, I'm the Eco Grinch. And I'm also a trained muralist facilitator with Unity Through Creativity. And this is Josh. Josh is the botanical curator and head gardener, and he started working with Keystone Heritage Park in 2021 and has experience working with desert plants both as a hobby and professional.
So I need notes.
Boy, that's a complicated map.
Isn't it? So residents of knew the park as Donovan Marsh before it was called Keystone. And this was a name taken from the north-south city thoroughfare of the park's west border. Portions of the park site were once under contract with the Santa Fe Railroad, desiring to construct a rail yard for loading and offloading piggyback rail cars. The railroad had started the process of building a switching yard on the wetlands area when the Upper Valley Neighborhood Association protested and appealed to the federal authorities. In 1993, a settlement to protect the wetlands was reached between the Environmental Protection Agency, the Corps of Engineers, and the City of El Paso and the Santa Fe Railroad. To accomplish this, a group of concerned citizens organized and rallied a massive amount of support and raised more than $1.3 million and purchased the 52 acres of the most valuable land from the owner. Next slide. And today, Keystone Heritage Park consists of an archaeological site, the El Paso Desert Botanical Gardens, the Chihuahuan Desert Experience, and the Kevin Von Finger Wetlands, a protected sanctuary for birds and other wildlife. Property is now owned by the Archaeological Conservancy, the City of El Paso, and operated by the nonprofit Keystone Heritage Park, Inc., which with support of grants, donations, and revenue for special events. So we would really appreciate your donations.
That's what this is, everybody. This is a hustle for y'all to donate.
Hustle.
We'll be accepting your wallets on the door, Leah.
This is a beautiful map. What can we say about this?
I can speak to that a little bit.
Yep.
So this, okay, so we're going to bounce around here talking about the history of Keystone, but this is a conceptual design that was put together by Site Southwest, who was one of the first landscape architect outfits to kind of design the visitor experience at Keystone Heritage Park. And so this was one of the conceptual designs of how the botanical garden, the visitor experience, and the wetlands park might all sort of come together. The one thing that is still sort of true about this drawing is the botanical gardens and the parking lot are roughly in the location that you see them there in the lower right-hand corner. The wetlands are definitely all still where you see them there. And then the part of the park that lies between Donovan Drive, which is on the lower side of the drawing there, and the wetlands is what we call the Chihuahua Desert Experience, and that is an ever-changing landscape experiment in desert landscaping, desert nature park stuff. Remember what Fernandez said a couple of years ago, well, a couple of decades ago, the Santa Fe Railroad started filling it in order to build railroad switching yard. So we have some very challenging growing conditions in that site. So that's where we got Josh. He's like big, strong botanical curator guy. He can rocks. So he's the guy challenging that stuff and making the plants grow. And then in the upper right-hand corner, we have the archaeological site. Now, a lot of people come to visit the archaeological site, and we'll talk about this a little bit more. There's not a whole heck of a lot left to see right now because what was known to be there was cataloged by the archaeology professor here at UTEP back in the 80s and 90s. And so that's basically an area of preservation. So that's that slide. I'll turn it back to Fernanda. Oh yeah, there's the archaeology. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, so this is a replicate of what the hut that was seen when they were trying to excavate. They found that and we're like, okay, let's stop digging because this is archaeological. And that's a replicate of what it would look like. The map on top is the entire river basin, and just to connect it to Water Week, the spring that the water that comes out literally from the Keystone Mountain used to be a tributary to the Rio Grande. And if there weren't so much concrete and other stuff in the way, that would be connecting to the river. So that's that. This is to show the variations of how that river was then modified. Not relevant to Keystone, but bigger picture. Right. So back to the pretty pictures. This is Keystone, one of El Paso's best kept secrets. You can have your weddings here, parties. We set this up for that would be the alleyway where you walk in if you get married. It's really pretty. What do we say? There are lots of events at the garden, and at the end we'll show some slides of the events coming up soon. I think there are more notes to read. Yeah, it's perfect for outdoor events. If we have good climate, when we have good climate, and perfect location for all your celebrations. We have a timeline trail and an observation deck where you can see the vast lake that's the water from the spring. There's also lots of art along the trails and historical monuments. More historical monuments, Luisi Pepe. And native plants.
Many native plants. So we have about 200 species of Chihuahuan desert plants distributed around the park. And this has increased over the last couple of years as the El Paso Cactus and Rock Club has donated about 1,200 cacti, ocotillos, and other plants to the park, which most of them have been planted under my direction, not by me personally. I just choose the site where we plant them so that they could last there for a long time. Which there's a lot of different considerations because the water level changes pretty significantly over the years, throughout the year and over the years. So here's a few of the species of cacti. We mainly focus on native plants, but we have other ones too, like the rosemary. And we have a few non-native species of Prickly-pear there. Many of these reseed themselves. We've seen a few Arizona rosewoods reseed themselves, and the desert willows have spread through the cracks, and whenever we get the chance to, we propagate those out, which are pretty easy. Many different types.
The desert with little blossoms. Beautiful.
And because of that, a lot of wildlife ends up thriving at the park as well. So we got plenty of pollinators, in, every part of the food web. So we see birds throughout the park. And
And we tell the residents, the visitors to the park, that all of those insects are our friends. So it is an organic park, and we teach them that as long as you are calm, they can just visit you and land on you, and they are not dangerous at all. We just need to learn about them and know that they are more afraid of you than you are of them. And if you're not afraid, they will be your friends. And they help pollinate, they help develop a lot of the food web. Yeah.
wasps in particular, they hunt some of the pests that are on certain plants. A lot of people don't know that. So I, not responding with aggression because they can probably sense that. There's some research about that.
Mhm.
Yeah, the full set of the trophic orders have going on here. And
So many birds. Those are the ibises, the ones with the big curved beaks that look like the Egyptian symbol of the ibis, of course. And those fly in beautiful flocks around March and April. They form that very particular V shape. And sometimes they do stop at Keystone.
Can I add about that?
Yeah.
So yeah, no, a note about the ibis at Keystone. I think that the ibis is kind of our iconic bird. The other iconic bird at Keystone are the inland gull, the ring-billed gull, because everybody always comes and says, "Why are there seagulls in the middle of the desert?" But the ibis is a migratory species and very charismatic, beautiful bird, and we get them by the thousands during the migratory season. And typically, our wetlands are fullest in the winter. I'll explain why they're fullest in the winter later, but the ibis will come in about February. In the last couple of years, we've counted 4,000 or 5,000 birds there, I estimate. This year, we didn't get any. And I think I attribute that to partly because we've only had a total of 8 inches of rain in the last 2 years. And so our wetlands are pretty low right now. The water level of wetlands is pretty low. I'm going to talk about Kevin for a second. Anybody in this room know Kevin? A few folks remember Kevin? Yeah, cool. That dude was really cool. He lived down the street from Keystone Heritage Park, and I think he was an archaeologist. I actually don't know what his profession was, but he was an archaeologist. I believe he was an archaeologist at Fort Bliss, and he retired and he got really involved in environmental activism here in El Paso. And because he lived down the street from Keystone, he always went and hung out and planted trees and tried to make Keystone a better place. And one of the reasons why I'm even involved at the park is because he and I were on the board of the Frontier Land Alliance together when I started my company. And one of the things I wanted to do was restoration and plant trees, and I was inspired by a guy like John Sproul. And Kevin hired me to come in and chop down salt cedars and plant cottonwood trees, and that was a lot of fun. And then he and I wrote a big grant together to do a whole bunch more work. And then he passed away right then, like as that project was getting kicked off. And so when he passed away, we decided to dedicate the wetlands in his honor because he is the guy that did so much work to protect them and make them beautiful and improve the bird habitat there. So what we do in the spirit of Kevin, and he's always watching us when we're in the park there.
Mhm.
yeah, tons of wildlife that happens at the park. And this piece of land that has been restored over time. There's a very vibrant forest that's growing out there, some cottonwoods that are fairly well established, and inside of those cottonwoods and other brush, there are at least 7 coyotes that live. And what we've seen, thanks to one of our volunteers named Robert Haynes, who has trail cameras out there, we've seen one of them have a set of litter, have a litter of food. Lots of work has been going on over the years. This is us after planting some trees out in the wetlands. This photo on the right is a painting that depicts the watershed that leads through Reservoir Canyon behind the Keystone Dam, which feeds the wetlands and filters off some of the water from the city.
I want to talk about that sign a little bit because it speaks to the water at the park. Often we wonder, everybody always asks, where does this water come from here at Keystone? Well, the idea is that's a clear sign and it frames the mountains, it frames the Franklin Mountains. And if you sit on that bench and just the right spot and you kind of hover a little bit, or if you're really tall, you can line the mountains up with the outline of the mountains on the poster or on the picture. And it shows the elevation of the different peaks and stuff. And then also on the sign of the mountains, it shows the area of the mountain that feeds to Keystone Heritage Park. So it's just an outline of the mountains with a little blue hash area that shows that if rain was to fall in that area of the mountain, it's going to end up in Keystone. So yeah, go to the next slide because I think we saw Keystone Dam. So Keystone Dam is about half a mile long. Actually, it extends off to the left of that photograph quite a bit more, and it captures runoff from a large area of the Franklin Mountains. Another way you can do it if you don't have that poster sign in front of you, if you stand out at Keystone, anywhere in Keystone, if you stand out in the mountain in there, and you put your hand out in front of your face, and you kind of cover the mountains with your thumb in the little crook of the mountain, that's like the watershed of Keystone. And so all of that water flows through the mountains and comes down and finds its way through stormwater channels and places like that and all kinds of, infrastructure. And then it ends up in Keystone Dam. Prior to development of the area, prior to the railroad going in and Donovan Road and all the agriculture, that would have flowed all the way to the Rio Grande. The Rio Grande in this area would have meandered probably mesa to mesa, would have been a mile wide and an inch deep, and would have roared during the season and certain rain events and during some monsoon seasons. But as a result of development and all of the things that have happened, all of our watercourses have really been confined and contained, and as a result, diminished. Because the way that the development works is we harness the water and we collect it and we get rid of it as quickly as possible through concrete lines, channels, and down into the river. The Rio Grande itself is in many ways just a water delivery system, straightened out, channelized, lined in concrete, designed to deliver a given amount of water to agricultural users in New Mexico, Texas, and Mexico as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And that's why we don't have a lot of the habitat that we should have around the river. So Keystone, like Rio Bosque, Keystone is on in the west side is a small little sliver of what kind of wetland habitat might have existed in this area 4,500 years ago when people would have settled here. Or actually, they weren't settling. What they were doing is they were using Keystone as like a seasonal stopover. And they did it because it was fertile hunting grounds. It was this great spot of water, close to uplands, easy place to set up a pit house, hang out for the season, hunt, gather, and then come back to it later on. So Keystone Dam holds a lot of water. In 2006, who was here in 2006? That big gray area north of the on top of the wetlands park there, that was all full of water. Keystone Dam worked. Almost didn't, but it worked. We got a lot of water in the park that year. Everything was great. So, but what happens is the water comes down through the mountain. It actually gets into the ground there, and Keystone wetlands are actually at a lower elevation, and so that water that comes up out of springs. So we're seeing groundwater that forms the wetlands. And the wetlands, I'm just going to come over here.
The maps too.
Oh, we have a mouse on.
Yeah.
Here's a mouse over there. So this is the wetlands area right here, and then of course there's new commercial developments throughout here. But all of this is marsh. It's a lot of it is salt cedar trees and stuff right now. This is all cattail marsh, because this is all open water. And in some years, the water goes from here all the way over here, completely filling up this whole area. This right here is probably like an inch or two deep. Over here, it's probably 4 or 5 feet deep. We're not really sure. Actually, a bathymetry survey was done recently, and I need to get my hands on that. Next slide. Oh, that's on top of the dam. That's the Keystone Dam.
Yep.
So here's the wetlands back here. Here's Keystone Wetlands back here. This is the dam, and that's the inside of the dam. And it's really cool because we've got Keystone Wetlands, Keystone Dam, and all of that's connected to Wrestler Canyon. And Wrestler Canyon is a 92-acre open space. It's an arroyo. It's an open space. And so if you were to kick a football over the end zone at Coronado High School, it would fly over Mesa Street and land in Wrestler Canyon. And if you were to drop of water, you would tumble down Wrestler Canyon. You'd end up in the dam, you'd soak into the ground, and then you'd come out here and you'd be habitat for white-faced ibis.
Wow.
And that's the dam. That's the big foreboding gray wall that is behind Keystone Heritage Park. So there's the big dam behind there, and that's what Josh was standing up on top of. But this is the wetlands, and this is a pretty good full year. Josh, did you take this picture?
Yeah, I took this picture.
Which year?
I think that was 2022.
This looks like 2022. If you would very quickly slip back to 2 slides so we can see that. Oh, one more slide. No, back.
One
please.
more
There you go.
picture.
So that was all of this area was totally wet in that picture, and it was water all the way across. So go ahead. And of course, with that water, we can support cottonwoods and willows, riparian species, and that support an abundance of bird habitat. Oh, lots of really cool grasses that grow when the moisture conditions are just right. That's like the fringe between the desert and the wetland out there.
I think this picture was taken during the winter time. So that was it. A little bit of that is like ice crystals that formed just because of the water soaking up and then refreezing.
Huh.
Structures that I think some of the Boy Scouts have made some of these structures out there.
We do a lot of Eagle Scout projects. They've built pergolas and pavilions and benches and yeah, fun stuff.
Those are the cattails.
Oh yeah, cattails. And so cattails, Fernanda, talk about cattails for just a minute.
I have a slide later with like their uses, and I also brought some show and tell baskets that I've made with cattails and the pillow that's made with cattail fluff. And yeah, the indigenous people just use them for everything, and we should use them for everything too, because they're great and they're not plastic filling for your pillow. You can go harvest them. It's a lot of fun, and it's a reciprocal relationship with the land. If you're going to take anything from the land, we also just encourage you to also, come volunteer a day, pick up the trash, have that relationship with the land and the water, because there are no boundaries, as we learned in the keynote.
This shows the pretty dramatic change in the water level that has happened over the years. I think this was 2023, one of the driest years that we've had on record. And when I first started working there in 2021, which was a decent rain year, I think we got 12 inches of rain that year. Where I was standing where I was taking this picture would have been underwater. And there would have been an island behind. And so you could probably have taken a boat or a kayak on top to try to cross all the way over there. And I haven't seen it like that since, but I've heard that it was like that in 2006 as well, during that crazy
It
rain.
was 2006, the whole thing was like, yeah. And then, but it was also like this in 2019. It happens every couple of years where we get a lot of water. It floods out really good. This looks like June in 2023. Yeah, it's pretty dry.
The creosote bush. There's some more cattails.
We've also recently we made a new trail that goes through the forest to try to let people to go and see this area. It's actually in the process of being expanded even more. with consideration for the wildlife that's there and other things. But this was an Eagle Scout project, I believe.
And Eagle Scout came and built these bridges across ponds that allowed us to make this loop trail around the wetlands. And we really hesitated for a long time to decide whether or not we wanted to build this trail because, like I said, Kevin was telling me no. But I said, Kevin, we really need to, we need to open this experience to the public because nobody knows that this exists in El Paso. And the way, so Josh sort of plays this trail through what actually used to be an old road and is part of the stormwater infrastructure. But it has all grown over so much that can't even recognize it. But in that area, we're cutting new trails and stuff, and it's all through salt cedar, and we hope to use the salt cedar material that we get out in other craft projects and structural projects around the park. Oh, that's our plant inventory.
Yep. So all of these little dots, I think the blue ones correspond to cacti, and other ones correspond to trees or shrubs or other plants. This is the survey or the inventory of the plants that we planted in 2022 and 2023 or 2021 and 2022. And I hope this is not going up. Look at this going up.
Nice.
It's not again.
I'll just chat.
The thing I like to see is that it's slowly converging to the shape of the park, which is testament to how much has been going on there. And this does not include more than half of the ones that have been donated by the Cactus and Rock Club, which is all plants that we had in stock that we purchased for this project.
All right, there is a Chiroloxia.
So this was a slide that from a study that that showed that they did some water quality surveys, which was mainly talking about the salinity of the water that is there. And they found that when there is less salinity or better water quality, there's an increase in the flora and fauna that are in those areas. There's some pictures taken by our volunteer Robert Haynes. We have some javelinas and coyotes. This is Harry the javelina. He actually was seen following the herd of the coyotes.
Oh, this is the goal video first.
This is the video I took myself, I think in 2020.
Land pose.
You can see the lake right there looking like an inland sea. A little bit.
You can go experience that if you visit.
The other kind of birds that come on by the thousands are yellow-headed blackbirds, and they're mostly gone now, but in the winter, they come in by the thousands. The most I've ever estimated is something in the neighborhood of 10,000 when there was every wire on every pole across the whole park was covered with yellow-headed blackbirds every evening for the season. That was specifically, I remember it in 2014 like that. Pretty remarkable. I haven't seen quite that many yellow-headed blackbirds, but it's really cool to watch the yellow-headed blackbirds do murmurations over the wetlands too in the morning and in the evening.
That's the coyote being followed by Harry the javelina. He's trying to keep up.
The javelina is like, coyote doesn't know I'm back here. So it's really cool because we do have a lot of wildlife. We have raccoons, skunks, foxes, bobcat have been seen there, deer have been seen there. We got the family of coyotes and the javelina. So all this really, great wildlife habitat for right here in the middle of the city. Very cool.
And the coyotes do yoga. Play it again.
Downward dog there.
Aww.
Let's call that.
You think he knows the camera's there?
So, folks.
Some of our cactus that we've had planted and donated by the Cactus Club, these look like hybrids. These look like the Claret Cup Texas Rainbow hybrids.
Yeah, the one on the right.
Mhm.
One of the cactus restorations like that. There was this was a different kind of a berm, and then I put a bunch of prickly pears to grow in there. He got hit by the cochineal, which flattens them out, and it's hard to get water out there to clean them all. But they're still established. They're like I said, I planted those ocotillos some years back, and I used this area to as the place, one of the places where I planted a lot of the cacti. So there's a few of the eagle's claws and the Texas rainbows up there. There's a few lechuguillas, but takes some time to get those established as well. One method of getting trees planted into in wetland locations and riparian locations is a method that Mike's been perfecting over the years, which is these tall pots, which are 3 foot PVC pipes where we plant different seeds, or we can plant willow or cottonwood cuttings inside of them and let them establish themselves. And that way they have deep roots that can reach down into the water table. In some places, planting these can be done without any subsequent irrigation. These were donated. This is the set that was actually donated to us by Sir Kevin Floyd here at Utah.
We use the tall pots for doing riparian restoration work. Specifically, they're really well suited for doing riparian shrubs in situations where they're not going to have a chance to get supplemental irrigation. And the long root into the soil column allows them to access moisture and stable soil temperatures, and until some springtime rains. So we try to, or some summertime rains. And what we do is we try to plant them when we're doing a restoration project where we're doing tall pots. We try to plant them in, say, September or October, where the temperatures, the ambient air temperatures going down. Soil moisture should be relatively high because we've had the summer rains.
The restoration projects and different seeds. There's sotos on the left, white oak, and then I some Juliana seeds, seed pods that I found kind of randomly around town. This is a datura, and from my own house, I love growing this one. This is a source of seeds for that I spread at the park review. But there's, even though datura was already at the park, and unfortunately, I had to get rid of this plant after 3 years because it has some kind of a living inside of it. But black nightshade, American black nightshade, good for the birds.
Yeah, so I added some more stuff about the cattails here. The roots, shoots, and pollen can all be consumed. I have harvested the pollen, which comes right before it turns into this corn dog shape. There's on the top, there would be like yellow powder. That'd be the pollen. It's high in protein. You can use that in pancakes. It kind of just goes right through you, but there it is. The jelly, when you're harvesting cattails when they're like freshly grown, they're very moist at the bottom and have this jelly, kind of like aloe vera gel. And it works exactly like aloe vera gel. You can put it on for mosquito bites. It's very cleansing, very hydrating, and very, very good for wounds, itches, anything, skincare. And the fluff can be used as a fire starter. We've used that for some of the fire camps that we do. And yeah, like I've mentioned, we've turned it into a pillow and lots of fun harvesting. And we'll have some crafts where you can come experience that. And also basket weaving with some of our craft events coming soon. We already started the gold video. So these are our upcoming events actually this weekend. Hopefully we can also share them with the full Water Week calendar schedule, because this is at Keystone Wetland Park. And we have monthly, there's this thing we call Mystical Market. It's an evening market with plenty of vendors. It's kind of a volunteer opportunity and just an opportunity to mingle with local economies. and there's like witchy stuff for sale and arts and crafts. And then another market that we have is particularly for arts and crafts and with live music and performances. So that'll be on Sunday. So you can come spend all weekend over at Keystone. Of course, go visit Rio Bosque first as well. And yeah, we will have, if you guys want to take pictures of that and share with your friends, we'd love to see you there.
I
And
want to add a note about the Keystone Craft and Culture Market. So Ruby Ann and I were trying to do things like Science Sunday and Talk Tuesdays, because we have an amphitheater at the park and we have a nice pavilion and we have these opportunities to do educational talks. And so we invite folks to come and give a presentation. So we need to get John or Sergio involved on a presentation one day. But let's see, Dr. Paul Hyder has come and given us lots of presentations about rattlesnakes and creosote bush and fun things like that. So John White, who is the curator of the Botanical Gardens here, the Centennial Museum, he and I did a talk about tree propagation and how to prune and all that kind of fun stuff. We've done talks about archaeology. We've screened movies. We have pre-H2O. We have the pre-H2O interns from UTEP. They come and they give presentations during the summer. And so what we were doing was we were doing all these things like Talk Tuesday and then Science Sunday and then the market on another day. And like Ruby Ann and I found ourselves with zero free time. So we've combined it all into the Craft and Culture Market. And so the Craft and Culture Market is actually a really fun, exciting place to come. And we have craft tables. Fernanda's always there doing a demonstration of some sort of natural material, weaving, recycled material things. We usually have a Talk Tuesday or a Science Sunday type presentation happening. We're gearing up to, we're working on figuring out how to screen movies and make it a little bit better. We've got some movies about watershed restoration that we want to do screenings of. There was a really good bird movie that came out a couple of years ago that I've been dying to get screened there at Keystone. So that's what Craft and Culture Market is all about. It's a good place for, and we have like vegan vendors that have the green ingredients and eco-veg or vendors that like sort of specialize in vegan things. And so I often give a tour of the wetlands to tie it back to the water. I often will do a tour about the wetlands and we talk about the conservation needs for wetlands. And so Craft and Culture Market's a lot of fun. And then you can, buy your significant other fun little gift.
Actually, there's also going to be Dr. Hyder's snakes coming to the mystical market. So if you want to go hold a snake.
Snake charming.
Yeah. So these are some of the examples of eco crafts. This season, I'm actually also partnering with Ollie Osher Lifelong Learning Institute. So the adults will be co-facilitators as we then show all of the craft opportunities to families that come visit at and Culture Market. And also we do a lot of volunteer work. One of the science projects, Branches to Roots. I've got a poster I just put, I need to refresh it because I just put in the picture of the poster that I was presenting earlier. These are some of the crafts, making Christmas wreaths out of the seeds using recycled materials. The kids come for field trips and have a lot of fun making stuff out of old paper, tissue rolls, etc. So you can become a core volunteer with our Branches to Roots project, which is the propagation of trees. So like we mentioned in the wetlands, we do pole cuttings, and that is great and very effective. However, with air layering, which is the alternative propagation method, we make sure that the cuttings have roots before we cut them off. So preparing a propagation pod on a mother branch, and then once it has roots, which takes over like 6 weeks to develop in this bag of soil. If you refresh that, the pictures will come up. Refresh the presentation. Yeah, I've got brochures about Branches to Roots here too. And Eco Craft flyer, if you want to spread the word. Some of the activities we'll be doing is paper mache, seed wreaths, cattail baskets, just like this one. This takes a bit of time, but if you just get started with braiding, it's really fun. Here we go. So that's branches to roots. That is the poster I was presenting at the poster session earlier. And this is basically a propagation pod that we set up after a tree surgery. Getting a small incision on a branch, getting to the stem cells in the branch, and then treating that with the right conditions and rooting hormones so that roots can grow on that branch. Then after some time, that branch will have roots in a pod. We can sever it from the mother plant and plant it elsewhere, thus propagating from one tree many. And this is citizen science, so you guys can get involved and volunteer and help with the data management. Lots to do. And that's Keystone Heritage Park. Very flooded that year. And Mike Gaglio took that. Yeah, open for questions. You show off the shirt you got too.
Yeah. Mary?
So, yes, I have a question.
Oh, we have to use the mic for the
Oh.
ones.
I think, right. So after we've heard about all of the many strategies used to obtain enough water for the Rio Bosque, the difference here at Keystone, I'm trying to kind of understand. It's basically, Keystone is so close to the mountain, it's getting that spring and drainage from any precipitation that comes, and that's the advantage in part that it has over the Rio Bosque. I guess that's a question for John also and Mike.
So I wouldn't necessarily characterize it as an advantage or one or the other, but it is an aspect that differentiates the two parks. All of the water that we get at Keystone is natural groundwater, spring-fed groundwater that comes into the wetlands. Now, there have been a few exceptions to that.
Yeah, great example.
There's a few exceptions to that, and I'll tell the story of one of them. A couple of years ago, there was something going on in the storm drains so underneath Donovan Drive, there's a concrete storm drain pipe that is about a 6-foot diameter concrete pipe that's put together in these little segments of concrete pipe. And so I'm going to talk about that more in a minute. But they were doing some work on that because there was a piece of it that was collapsing or something. And so the contractors had gotten in there and they were doing work. And what they did is they put a big plug in it. And one day, and like nobody knew that, like nobody driving on Donovan knew that there were contractors working underground who had plugged this giant pipe. Okay. I didn't even realize how big this pipe was. Until one day on Donovan, there was this giant puddle. And then another block down the road, there was another giant puddle. And what was happening was the water that was supposed to flow through that stormwater pipe was backing up because of that plug, and it was coming out on Donovan. Well, it was fine. People were swerving and trying to avoid this big puddle and causing crashes on Donovan. And one day, a guy skidded out. He was burning rubber down Donovan, and he skidded out and he landed on the wall of Keystone Heritage Park. It like crashed through the wall. And like we all just kind of finally said, all right, enough of this. What is going on? You know? And so we found out that the contractor had plugged the pipe. And so we got into this emergency situation of needing to drain that pipe out. So one day I come back and there's one of those big water utilities, big blue vac trucks, and they're dumping out all that water. And I slammed on my brakes and I pulled over and I said, hey, what are you going to do with all that water? I said, I got a place for you. He's like, oh, I'm going to take it down over here. And I was like, well, don't drive that far. Just come right over here. And so what we ended up doing actually was installing a pump in these storm drains. We ended up we installed a pump in those storm drains and we pumped all that water while they were doing that work on that stuff. We pumped all that water back into the wetlands. And that was really cool. So we got the wetlands to fill up really nice. And I think was that before your time or?
Probably before my time.
So it's pre-COVID. This is all like 2018, 2019, I think. And then it occurred to me though, that that big storm drain pipe that's underneath there is actually acting like a wetland drain. And so, I mean, do we have wetland scientists in the room? Do we have any, like, do we know about wetlands here? Do we know what a wetlands drain is? You guys know, have you ever heard about drain tiles? So the US Capitol was built on a wetland. And the way they do that is they dig trenches into the ground and they put tiles. In the old days, they used to use like clay tile and they'd put them in there and it would basically form a drain pipe underground that would take that water somewhere else. And basically that's what's happening underneath Donovan, I think, is that there's this big giant 6-foot concrete pipe that's supposed to be sealed together. But if you stand in over any of the storm drains along Donovan and listen closely, you'll just hear running water all the way down. And all that water is making its way all the way down to the Rio Grande and is being dumped out by the electric plant in Rio Grande. And I think that that's part of the reason why our wetlands water table is dropping. And we're not getting as much water as we possibly could.
That's
I don't know.
really interesting.
Yeah, I don't know how we're gonna, I tried to figure out how to test that hypothesis but we haven't figured that one out yet.
I have another question also. It's about the birds that frequent wetlands, that love the wetlands. And I know we've got several stops going up north along the river valley, going up into New Mexico. So is it the case that these migrating flocks and different species will potentially just come all the way down, stop where they want to, maybe stop overnight, then they go further, all the way down to Rio Bosque, perhaps even further along the valley? Or is there a relationship between the wildlife, the flying wildlife, and just this patchwork of wetlands we have going all the way up north?
I'm certain that there is a relationship. I think that in my observations of the bird behaviors as they're coming in for landing and stuff, I've watched ibis, flocks of ibis will fly overhead. They come south in the evening because they're coming from the farm fields. And so they're coming in to roost. And I'll see them, they'll be flying south, and maybe, let's say, a group of 30 or 40 strong will be flying over. And then like 10 of them will peel off of that group and they'll come and they'll fly around and they'll go, never mind, hang on, and they'll like literally take back off and kind of join back up with the other ones. And they're like, nah, we're gonna go check out John's place down in the lower valley. We're gonna go down there. And then they're like, oh man, David's down there. I don't want to hang. We're gonna go back up to Keystone. I don't know. I'm being silly. I'm personifying the bird behavior. I would imagine that there's a relationship between all these watering holes. I don't know. Has anybody studied that, John, locally?
Big studies, but certainly you constantly got movement up
Yeah.
and down the valley.
Definitely.
There's a question online. Can you read it out loud?
Okay. Can you respond to online questions?
Not that one.
Have you faced any problems with park residents, coyotes, javelinas,
Yeah.
venturing into the neighborhoods around the park? Yeah, probably so. I think that there's a good, I know that raccoons definitely go back and forth across Donovan. I suspect that coyotes are also doing that same thing. On the other side of Donovan from Keystone, we have the railroad. There's an irrigation ditch or a drain ditch. And then there's these long, deep backyards of the people that live along Emory. And so these yards are very big. So there's a lot of wildlife habitat happening just in the residential neighborhood on the other side of the street. So certainly there's a flow of wildlife going around all of that. But that's kind of getting interfered with by the traffic and stuff these days too.
And so we're about to install a sign that says slow down wildlife crossing because there's been too many raccoon deaths and other critters. I even saw a peregrine falcon one time run over on the road. So I guess that happens when the big trailers pass by and there's a big draft of wind and the birds even collapse, so. That happens, but we have to be respectful of our wildlife, and so we educate citizens about that. Sometimes people will be like, what do you do if you see a coyote? And in Texas, they'll be like, oh, well, you got your guns. But no, we want to educate all that we need to live in peace with all of our fellow critters. So definitely be kind and appreciate the nature and the range of diversity we have. Another, put this picture back up because this is what do you think this bird is? The red bird. It looks like a cardinal, but if you look on the Wikipedia page, it'll tell you this is way beyond the range of cardinals. But actually, we do have cardinals or pyroloxia, and
They're different birds, right? A cardinal and a
yes,
parrot.
yes, they are different birds.
Yeah.
And we have seen both at Keystone, and there is apparently a mating pair that is hybridized between those two
Wow.
bird species. So cool. That's it. Other questions? Yeah.
You need a mic.
So I know there's been progress of Keystone having its drier period mainly because of how little rainfall there is. But I've been curious because as we all know from like the Paris Agreement, we've exceeded right now 1.6 degrees increase in temperature, which is terrible. And I want to know, like, is there a risk potential of these wetlands drying out?
There's
And
always
is there anything that we can do to mitigate those increasing temperatures?
So you bring up a real good topic there, the idea about the temperature increase and that causing things to dry out. I think that we're experiencing that. We're seeing the effects of things drying out. Have we passed that critical threshold? A couple of months ago, I went to a presentation in New Mexico where they were showing the data how once you reach this certain temperature, and it's kind of related to the 1.6 degrees increase, but I'm not going to speak to it completely accurately. But after an arid ecosystem reaches that sort of critical threshold, there's almost no amount of water you can add fast enough that will hold on to, because the temperature is just too high and it'll just evaporate off. And so is that happening? Possibly. Is Keystone at risk of drying out as a result of that? Possibly. I think that our watershed is such that the location where Keystone is situated, it'll always be a wet spot in the city, if you will. What I think is a more important threat to it drying out, a more imminent threat, is that drain pipe that I mentioned, combined with stormwater management in the upper watershed. The gray infrastructure that's so quickly gets rid of that water. Keystone was a wetland thousands of years ago, potentially millions of years ago. Do we need to? I thought we were saying time. Keystone's been a wetland for thousands and thousands of years, and it was a much larger area. I think if you look at the landscape, the campus andesite at UTEP and Mount Cristo Rey form this sort of bottleneck of geology that caused all of the valley, the Rio Grande Valley, all has to funnel down through there. And so that whole area from Cristo Rey all the way up to Canutillo and beyond would have been, pretty good marshy wetland stuff all the way up there. And Keystone's all that's left. And it's drying out because of the way we manage water in our upper watersheds and because of the way we manage for our transportation infrastructure and that kind of stuff. So I think those are the bigger threats, but the increase in temperature ain't helping either. So we need more trees so we can cool the place down a little bit. More questions?
Okay, well, wait, John has one.
I am curious about
Oh, wait, John.
curious about the soil salinities in the area. And whether that might result in some plant communities that you otherwise might not expect.
Yeah, the soil salinity at Keystone is very high. And the great majority of our species are halophytes, which means plants that
Love water.
thrive on salty areas. Find a cool picture of the thing. There you go. That's a good one right there. Ding, 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 ding. Okay, so, oh, come back. All right. That grass right there, this patch of grass, that's inland saltgrass by Stickless spicata. That's a remarkable plant that will live underwater for 6 months. You know, I thought it was going to drown out, but it lived underwater for 6 months, and then it lives without water for 6 months. And so there was some patches of inland saltgrass on the other side of the wetlands that was over. If I could, the picture continued on over here. You can just imagine me pointing at it. And we did some shovel transplants. We just, some shovel-sized plug transplants out here on a year when there was water along the coast right there. And so we just plopped in 5 or 6 of these shovel transplants in different areas, and it has spread quite a bit across the park. So the inland saltgrass is great for that. This is the false purslane, Trianthema, I believe, kind of halophytic.
We have the secatones out there.
Well, yeah, alkali sacaton is a good one. And then out here in the more of the uplands, a lot of what we have is Soida nigra. And then
Iodine bush, I remember that.
And then also Allanrolfia, common name is iodine bush, that grows over by the springs
Which are very
in the
soft.
forested areas.
Very, very
Very, very soft. Yeah.
Very salty and high pH. So it's almost like a soda lake.
And that's because there's a gypsum layer under the wetland.
I actually tested some of the salt that was there,
It's sulfur.
and it reacts with vinegar. So
Carbonate.
I actually tasted it myself. So it's a lot of it is actually carbonate salt. So yeah, it was pretty. It's a rarer version than just a salt lake. It's a soda lake. So the pH coming up at 10 sometimes.
Soda Lake City, I should call it.
It's pretty fascinating too to talk about that because, it's now it's sort of a playa lake kind of scenario, which all over New Mexico, there's playa wetlands. And what'll happen is the soils, so as the water recedes, the soils dry out, but they stay real puffy. These puffy salts stay up there. But then there's fines, like clay fines. And so when the wind comes along, the springtime winds come along, we get this really fine white powdery dust that gets picked up off of the soil out there. And the answer to what slows that down is mulch. If we just get wood chips and throw that stuff out there, that really changes. I think the mulch tends to change the whole biochemistry or what's going on in that real salty soil.
Okay.
Thanks. Come check out. I'm really impressed by the cattail pillow. I went and I had my own custom made.
Tonight, right, Fernanda?
Yes, tonight is the movie at the Rubin Center for Visual Arts. It's a really great movie called Water is Love, Ripples of Regeneration. And it's so hopeful. If you're feeling hopeless about the climate crisis, like this is one to watch because it really tells us that water is being stored in these green living things. And if we work together with them, we can change the microclimate and then collaboratively change the macroclimate. And then there's a presentation of dance collaboration, and some wetland crazy people are going to be dancing in it with the other dance class, including Sergio and maybe myself. So yeah, come check that out tomorrow.
Yourself, you're the lead.
Okay. Great, and come check out the eco crafts and yeah. All right, thank you guys.
Thank you all.